introduce myself. I'm Zach Madden. I grew up in Maryland. I live in LA now. I went to school out here.
I'm Rio Finnegan. I grew up in Tucson, Arizona, and went to school for film in New Mexico.
To kick it off with the first question, what was the first project that made you fall in love with filmmaking? I think it was just making little sketches with my friends at home growing up, and just using like the family handy cam and spending like hours in my room cutting them down. I just loved making stuff like that. So what about you?
I think for me, I always wanted to be kind of like a writer, when I was young, I wanted to be a novelist, and I kind of just started writing these books. What I realized is that the stuff I was writing was, not as cinematic as I wanted it to be. So, what I realized is that I needed to do something else, and I found this book on screenwriting, read that, and was like, oh, finally.
Which one was it? Save the Cat?
No, it was Sid Field.
Oh,
Sid
nice.
Field's screenplay. And I read that and kind of realized what I wanted to do. And in my senior year of high school, me and my my video teacher, who I became really good friends with, because I was the only kid in his class. So
it's just you?
Yeah, it was hilarious. Well, it was kind of like a after school thing, and I was the only one that signed up because no one else cared. So me and him, we became friends. He was like in his 30s. We just, made a movie, and hired local actors, non-actors too. It was a wild experience, and we made it look pretty decent,
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And then how did 1-900 come about?
So 1-900 came about in college, my last year of school. Pretty much a group thing, with a bunch of students and buddies of mine. And we were really lucky because we had access to all the good cameras and stuff.
Nice.
And actors from New Mexico that were also contracted with the school and stuff. So
I guess that leads into the next question, which is, what were the resources you used when you were creating the film? So it was through school, so you had all the school resources that you were able to use.
Exactly. eBay was a big thing because
for the props and stuff.
I wanted our props to be like really freaking real. You know what I mean?
I like the telephone.
So put a good chunk of money so I could get some kind of like 80s style.
The production design was great.
It was all worth it because it really helped the,
totally
set dressing. What about you, my friend?
When I'm not directing, I work in camera department. I'm in Local 600, the camera union, and I save up in between projects working in camera, and then I sort of put it into directing stuff. So this was one of those where I'd saved up for a little while, and I just put a chunk of those savings into the project. I think the biggest resource that I was able to have on this was just the crew that was like in it, because having people like that surrounding you, for me, is like the biggest resource, because they just add so much to the project. All of those really creative minds coming together was the biggest resource. I think that was really, I was very lucky to be able to work with all of them on this.
Nice. That's so cool, man.
I think once I got past that idea of I'm the director, this is my movie kind of a thing, which starting out was like when I was much younger was sort of the thought process, and that goes away very quickly when you make a lot of really bad stuff.
Yep.
And one of my favorite parts about making any of these projects now is working with people that are much more talented than me in a lot of ways and bring a lot of really great ideas together and problem solving on the fly. Once you open your world up to really listening to people and being collaborative and taking ideas, for me, it completely changed the quality of the projects I'm making. I mean, I still have a ways to go. Obviously, I think everyone always has room to do better, but I saw a huge jump in the work I was putting out and the watchability of it once I let go of that ego part, you know?
Yep. I'm the same way. I worked a lot of, I think I worked more sets than I did like make my own films. And I think that's, you know, that's true for a lot of filmmakers, you know what I mean? Because you gotta save that money up, like you were saying. But one of the jobs I do a lot is, and I think I love it, it's ADing, assistant directing, because you learn so much about what not to do as a director. And I've learned so much about like ego and how to subvert ego and to, you know, even as an AD, you know what I mean? I've met ADs that are just like, have like a reputation of yelling and all these things.
Well, I've worked with them.
I agree with that. I get it, you know, if that, you know, psychologically gets the people going, I guess. But to me, I'm like the bouncer, you know what I mean? Which I am a bouncer here too. So like, ADing and bouncing go hand in hand.
Yeah.
So anyways, you kind of learn that it's all about communication and making sure that, you know, even as a director, that everybody around you feels like they're being heard. You know what I mean? Because they're your crew. You know what I mean? Sure, you had the idea for the ship, right?
Right.
But they're like hoisting the reins, like making sure the
100%. I've been on sets as a crew member where the director kind of loses the crew, you know?
Yeah.
And it is not a pleasant experience. And oftentimes, more than not, it turns out to be, it hurts the project in a big way.
Oh yeah, it does. A lot of money lost. If you could kind of just break down your film a little bit, I want to know.
Yeah. Project's called PHOTOTRON 69, and it's about a mailroom attendant who has a relationship with the photocopy machine in the office. It came about because I wanted to try to write something where there was very little dialogue. There was some other way of sort of communicating. And so it sort of morphed into this thing where it was a photocopy machine that we could use the light in, that we would build this master prop for it. And we would use the light on the inside, which took a lot of work in my garage to try to figure out the best way to do it so it was programmable. But having that be the character that we connect with in some way. It's also like, I really love the like liminal spaces and like the idea of like this monotony hole that you can get just like sucked down in any job you're doing. It took a lot of planning. But I love to like build stuff and work on stuff. And so I just took like, I have a garage in the house and I would just set up, we bought this old photocopy machine and we gutted it. And we tried to make it so that we could have the light be a key light. And it was too small to fit any sort of programmable DMX lighting in there. It was just too shallow. So we couldn't put, like a C60 or anything like that inside,
Right.
that would have had enough light. Those screen panels that are in concerts, like that are in the background, and they come in squares.
Mm-hmm.
I was talking to a company about renting some of those, but it's for a 2-day shoot. It was a minimum of like $7,000, and you had to pay for a tech separately. And it was just these 4 little pieces. And basically the guy was like, yeah, it just plays back like a screen. Like that's all it does. It's just a screen you can put into different places. So when he said that, it was like, oh, okay, we can just get a screen that is thin enough and small enough and bright enough, like a daylight rated screen. We found on some website, it was made in China for like army vehicles or something. And it was literally an LED screen, but it didn't have any casing, and it had an HDMI port. So we could feed cabling in through the machine and on the fly do like Premiere or After Effects editing to get the sort of light and scan mode that we wanted. And it was such a quick render that we could just like, if the timing wasn't working out while we were shooting, I could just go down to the little laptop that was on the floor and change it real quick.
That's really cool, dude.
It turned out to be this like experiment of like special effect props and like how you can really use that as sort of a character. And it was really fun.
Practical effects.
Totally, which I love. Cool. Are you working on anything now?
Yes, I'm working on a semi-autobiographical show right now.
Like a mini-series kind of a thing?
Yes.
Cool.
So, you may not know, I am in a wheelchair. This guy
okay.
right here. I have spina bifida since I was a kid. And, I'm kind of just wanting to like explore that. So just to kind of make something honest and real about, people that feel, not just me, just other people and in the disabled community that just feel lost in their early 20s. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Totally.
People that just feel like, oh, I don't have too much of a voice, so.
Right.
The thing is like we have more of a voice than we think, but the thing is like communicating that. I think I wrote 5 episodes over the pandy, so
nice.
I love writing, like it's such a fun thing. It's kind of my favorite in the pantheon of hats we wear.
Right.
In this job, it's really fun to kind of look at it, and I'm also a story consultant, so people just come to me if they like are having trouble with their third act or their certain characters aren't as strong, and it's really fun kind of like breaking it all down into like a puzzle, right?
Yeah.
And you're like structured, I know some Hollywood people really like Save the Cat, but I'm more of like the Joseph Campbell kind of like monomyth.
Cool. Yeah.
The hero's journey kind of thing. I think it gives us more places to jump in and explore. You know what I mean?
Totally. What's the best piece of advice you received related to filmmaking?
Start as an AD. I mean, don't I got that advice, and I give this advice to anybody that goes into film school, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, and going like, I'm gonna be Tarantino. I'm gonna be a director, nothing else. Right. And I say no. Don't do that. Do every single job first, so you know how to work it. And then when you're a director, you can kind of figure out every part that needs to be worked if you can, if you have worked that job in the past.
Totally. Yeah, I think that's great advice, actually.
And assistant director, you got to know how to deal with yourself.
Totally. And timing and all that stuff, scheduling, everything.
Exactly. What about
That's
you,
great advice. I think the best advice that I got was just really listen to the people around you. And it was like, that was huge for me. And it is something that you have to let go of, that ego. You just have to let it go. And that was truly was the best advice that I've gotten. And it would be the advice that I would give to anybody starting out, is like, take people's advice. At least really listen to them. That's like, it's only going to make things better.